Hi YouTube and welcome to my channel. My name is Patrick. It seems like every year is the year of the Linux desktop, and we've been saying that for at least 15 years as far as I'm aware, and for some reason this mystical year of the Linux desktop never comes to fruition. Why is that? What's holding Linux back? So I talked to about a dozen IT nerds who don't use Linux on the desktop to figure out why they're avoiding it. And some of the answers will surprise you. So with all of that being said, let's dig right in. The whole idea of the year of the desktop Linux is the idea that Linux will gain substantial market share all of a sudden in the span of a year. And this has been something we've been saying, like I said, for over a decade. For example, when Windows 7 went out of support, everybody was screaming about how Linux is going to take off and replace it. But in reality, everybody just switched to Windows 10. And then, more recently, when Windows 10 went out of support, everybody said everyone's going to switch to Linux. And most people just buy new computers and run Windows 11. So what's going on here? Why isn't Linux taking market share when it has the opportunity to, when we're so sure that it will? Because right now Linux has about a 4% market share, and that has barely gone up from 3% a couple of years ago. So yes, there is growth, but it is incredibly slow. So again, what's holding it back? Well, I'm going to break this down into three sections, three main points that I've summarized from my conversations with these various people to give you a picture of what needs to change and why Linux hasn't taken off yet. Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, those are really the only enterprise-friendly distributions. You see, when it comes to an end user's desktop, a business wants to have somebody that they can pick up the phone and call for help. This usually drills down to IT support staff who answer the phones and fix the problem. Part of the problem is that it's really hard to get support staff who know about Linux, because the majority of people who know about Linux enough to troubleshoot it are going to be higher level in the IT team than support staff. They're going to be like the systems administrators, and with that level of understanding, there's a lot more benefit you can provide a company than IT support. And so finding people who can actually support Linux desktops is really difficult. In addition to that, companies like it when their IT support has someone to call for help when something doesn't work. This is generally the form of vendor support. Companies always want to have vendor-provided support wherever possible, at least the smart ones. And that's why I say that Red Hat, Ubuntu, and OpenSUSE are the only enterprise-friendly solutions, because they're the ones that offer first-party support and are commercially viable. And another issue with the lack of commercial grunt behind Linux is marketing. I mean, when was the last time you saw an ad for Linux? You probably never have. And that boils down to the question of who's responsible for marketing Linux. Is it the distro maintainers, the companies that funds distros? Is it the Linux Foundation? It's a bit of a finger pointing situation. Like who's supposed to spend the money on marketing? And because of that, the marketing hasn't been a thing. And that's important because, believe it or not, there are two positive ways someone will respond to an ad. Either they will be interested in the product being shown, or they already use the product and their decision is galvanized by seeing how popular it is. So marketing does actually matter. So one big reason why you don't see Adobe apps on Linux is because it has so few people using it. And another big reason why you don't see Adobe apps on Linux is because it's hard to target Linux in general. You see, when you're making an application for Linux, you often have to decide something like what distro will it run on, what desktop environment will it run on, and those decisions are important and core to the way that you build your app. The problem with that is that Linux already has a small fraction of the market share, and when you make an app for Linux, you're targeting a fraction of that fraction, because you can't just make an app that works for all Linux distros, so you're always only going to be getting a fraction of that fraction, and that's not very appealing to commercial vendors. Now, there are solutions to this that are coming out of the woodwork. For example, FlatHub. FlatHub is a great resource, and it uses Flatpak, which is cross-compatible with almost every Linux distribution. It uses Flatpak, and it's an app store where you can download tons and tons of different apps. The problem is, it's not a commercial space. You can't sell apps on FlatHub. I think that if that changed and you saw FlatHub starting to sell applications there, now we're talking about a dynamic shift. But as of yet, everybody has failed at creating a commercially viable Linux app store. So I'm going to get this out of the way first. Most Linux distributions, most desktop environments, are easier to use than Windows. Like, objectively, they're easier to use than Windows. The problem is, everybody's already familiar with Windows, meaning that they use Windows at work, so they use Windows at home, and they use Windows at home, so they want to use Windows at work. They don't want to have to learn something new. From the perspective of a hardcore Windows user, Linux looks incredibly difficult, despite the fact that it's objectively easier. From their point of view, it is more difficult than Windows. And look, things go wrong on computers, and when something goes wrong, you're probably going to use a search engine like Google to figure out how to fix it. The problem with this user experience on Linux is that almost every time you're given terminal commands. And let me be upfront with this, 99% of people don't want to touch the terminal. They don't care about it, they don't think it's important to learn, they're scared of it. It's not a good user experience, and the problem with it is that it's not discoverable. When you open a terminal, you're presented with a blank black box with some text in the corner. There's no way to intuitively understand what commands are available to you or even what they do. Yes, there are man pages, but if you've never used a terminal before, how are you going to know about man pages? So the problem here is that the majority of support you can get for Linux comes in the form of terminal commands, and frankly, people don't want to mess with that, meaning that they give up on Linux after trying it for a few days and switch back to Windows. And the reason we see so many guides using the terminal is because there are so many different user interfaces for Linux. You've got GNOME, you've got KDE, you've got window managers, you've got Sway, Hyperland, and all of these are radically different. And so if you want to write a guide on how to fix something across as many Linux installs as possible, you're going to write the guide using the terminal. And I don't know what the solution for this is. Either people are going to have to get cool about the terminal really quick, or we're going to have to start putting out dozens of copies of every guide online on how to do stuff in every individual GUI. I don't see either of those things happening, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about the future of Linux. Is the year of the Linux desktop going to come eventually? And I think yes. Once there is a unified package manager that is compatible with the majority of Linux distributions, like Flatpak, that is commercially usable, not like Flatpak, then we'll see a shift and more paid applications will come to Linux, which ironically will bring more people to Linux because then their apps will be there. I think that's the first thing that it would be reasonable to see fixed in the next few years. As far as the fragmented user experience and the support issues, I don't really know what the solution to that is. In the early 90s, we had the common desktop environment, and that was kind of the de facto standard. And then we had GNOME 2 in the early 2000s, and then GNOME 3 kind of lost a lot of momentum. KDE picked up a lot of the user base. There could be a future where we have a new CDE, common desktop environment. There might be a future where that's a thing again. If it is, I think that will be a big deciding factor for if Linux gets popular, because if there's a common desktop environment, that's available across distributions, people can write guides for that without having to make a dozen different copies for every UI. It could happen, but I think it'll have to happen before Linux picks up substantial market share. And look, here's the thing. I want Linux to succeed. I want Linux to have a huge market share. I want it to be as popular as possible. I think Linux is easier than Windows. It's more useful than Windows. It's a better experience than Windows. It's more ethical than Windows. I think that Linux has all these positive aspects that really set it head and shoulders above the competition. There's just those three core issues that are holding it back. Anyway, thank you for watching. My name is Patrick. If you liked the video, consider liking the video right down there. If you want to see more videos, consider subscribing. And with all of that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.